It's so funny. It's so funny.
Thank you, sir. Who's right here? Rick? Rick. Yep. You be here? No, he came before I did.
So I'd go to the 800 one.
I know you don't get sick money, but guess what, you can't.
Yep. Okay.
I haven't paid
Planning
my
commission,
dues
so I
yet.
gotta go.
You haven't paid your dues.
It's okay. Bye.
You ready, Michelle? I'd like to welcome everybody to the Riverdale City Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022. I'd like to show all the commissioners are present with the exception of Commissioner Eskelson, who is excused. Public comment, is anybody here to make any public comment tonight? Then we will move forward. Presentations and reports, Mr. Eggett.
Thank you. As was noted in the work session, I'll just do a brief summary. We do have two rezone requests. One is for the corner parcel of 4400 and 700, 4400 South, 700 West. Request from a C3 to an R2 zoning, or R4. I apologize. I've got R2 on the mind from my last discussion upstairs. The other property is the Cary Cycle property from a C3 to an R4 zoning. Those will both be on the agenda to set a public hearing at the next meeting. So plan for that. We do obviously also have a request tonight, set a public hearing for a PRD component of the Coleman View Heights, and a request set a public hearing for an amendment to our moderate income housing plan element of the Riverdale City General Plan. Additionally, we have either we have or we will be issuing a building permit for Cheddar's, so that will finally get to go off the ground, thank goodness. And we expect a new furniture use to move into the Shopco building. That's all I can say at this point because they haven't fully closed. And we also anticipate in the near future an application for redevelopment of the John Parrish site. So all those things are going forward. And then at City Council level, I received the Shake Shack final submittals to go to City Council. I received AFCU's final submittal on subdivision vacation plat to go to City Council, and I received the Riverdale Townhome subdivision plat to go to City Council. So those are all progressing forward. That's the report I have.
Thank you, Mr. Eggett. Consent items. Do any commissioners have any changes to the meeting minutes from August 9th, 2022? If not, a motion is in order.
I move we approve the consent items.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Action items. Action item number 1, consideration of conditional use permit request for proposed internal accessory dwelling unit, that's a tongue twister, residential property use located at approximately 4500 South, 1025 West, as requested by Rick and Tina Milligan. Mr. Eggett.
Thank you. So as required by Riverdale City Code 10-14-14, any request for secondary residential use in a existing primary dwelling or primary residential use dwelling is required to go through an internal accessory dwelling unit as long as it's in the zones listed that are allowing for that use, which would be A1, A2, RE15, RE20, R1, 10, and R2 zones. In this case, this request is for an R2 zone. Any request for an internal accessory dwelling unit is required to go through a conditional use permit review with the Planning Commission for that use. Mr. and Mrs. Milligan have paid the fee and submitted an application for that request. And so everything seems to be in order. They also provided pictures for that request. A couple of components for the request to be reviewed by the Planning Commission include establishing appropriate modes of egress, window egress for residents occupying the bedrooms of the internal accessory dwelling unit, not altering the exterior appearance of the primary dwelling, making sure that there's a secondary entrance that doesn't visually or functionally affect the perspective of it looking like a single family dwelling, as well as no failed septic tanks, providing any septic uses to the property, which in this case it's connected to city sewer, so that shouldn't be an issue. And then making sure that the internal accessory dwelling unit has a set apart off-street parking space provided for it. If those items are met or those requirements are achieved, then it should be pretty easy to consider the internal accessory dwelling unit. And with that, I would defer to the Planning Commission for any further discussion with me. And I don't know if are Mr. and Mrs. Milligan here present.
Nope.
I don't see him today. I know she's pretty hopeful to accomplish it, so I apologize that she's not here. But I didn't have a good email address for her. I would have let her know.
Thank you, Mr. Eggett. Discussion by the commissioners? If not, a motion is in order.
I know there was some discussion about egress as well. If there's any request to do that, I will follow up with the building official and communicate to the property owner the thoughts there. So
Looking at the pictures that they provided, it looks like they have plenty of egress areas in that lower.
and I could just
Back, yeah.
and I certainly could communicate that the bedroom would have to be in the room that has the egress available. Yeah.
That's the main thing, is just let them know that, but
Okay.
we can stipulate that on the motion.
Yep.
The other thing, didn't you mentioned parking? I don't see any indication in the pictures that there's extra parking available.
Yeah, and the only thing, I mean, if you're willing to give me a second, I could at least pull up on an aerial from the GeoGizmo from Weber County and confirm it. But having looked at it in the past, I believe it's a wider parking area that easily would accommodate at least 2 lanes of parking. So even if they are parked outside on the lot, it should accommodate their parking. But I'll look real quick. If you'd like,
It's a double car garage, and then there's an extra slab on the other side.
yeah, and if there's the additional slab, then that more
Then
than
it is,
accommodates
yeah.
that
Does have an
single family
Yeah.
dwelling use.
I'm not sure if there's a walkway down from that slab down to the basement area or not. I go by it all the time, but I don't remember that.
Oh yeah, there's in fact in the aerial they've got 3 cars parked in the driveway,
Okay.
side by side.
All right.
Review. Right here. Go back.
I wish they were here so we knew this is gonna cause a parking issue.
I'd like to make a motion.
Mr. Jones?
Make a motion that we approve the conditional use permit for the proposed internal accessory dwelling, residential property use located at approximately 4500 South, 1025 West, as requested by Rick and Tina Milligan, with the stipulation of checking on that egress on the bedroom.
Second.
Will you poll the commissioner, Michelle?
Commissioner Nye,
Aye.
Commissioner Wingfield,
Aye.
Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
Commissioner Jones,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Spires.
Aye.
Passes. Action item number 2, consideration of conditional use permit request for proposed body art tattooing parlor studio property use located in a suite at approximately 750 West Riverdale Road within Fifth Avenue Salons, as requested by Albert Schiffler. Mr. Eggett.
Thank you. Again, a conditional use permit request here. You'll see following the application, there's actually a brief narrative from the participant who would like to provide business at that location. So you can read over that if you have any questions relative to his comments there. You'll see following that an outline of how the suite would be used, which is suite number 10 in the building. This is located at the 700 West crossing development here on the corner of Riverdale Road and 700 West. The application has been paid for. You'll see thereafter in 10-10A-4 under uses under the C3 zone, way down on the 3rd page of that list. Tattoo parlor is listed as a conditional use permit. For that purpose, we're here before the Planning Commission, and then the basis of review for conditional use permit. I did check with I did check with all the department heads that would have any comment on this one, as well as I forgot to mention, but I should mention, even the IADU one, and in both cases, there were no comments or feedback of concern from any department heads. On this one specifically, I asked the fire marshal if he had any concern. He said no, especially with it being internal in our existing business. The risk is relatively low. He might be maybe a little more concerned to at least see the site if it were its own standalone business building, but he didn't have concern. Having been inside of the suites building, he's familiar with it. So with that, I don't know of any concerns from city department heads or staff, and I guess I would defer to the planning commission for any questions or comments you may have of me or the applicants.
Thank you, Mr. Eggett. Discussion?
Does the applicants want to see?
Do you guys want to come up and talk about what you're doing or anything? Can you state your name and the city you live in, please, for the record?
My name is Albert Schiffler. I go by Ted. I live in Ogden, Utah. Born and raised in Utah. What we're trying to do, my wife and I, we want to open a private tattoo studio, not the typical what we call street shops. It's just the two of us, and we want to specialize in a more private clientele. We want to partner with a couple of groups here in Utah. And the reason that we're not doing a normal studio like you would see in a standalone building is that we want to specialize in helping post-surgery mastectomy cover-ups, and we're going to work with a group that does cover-up tattoos for victims that are recovered from sex trafficking. So normal tattoo studios aren't what we're looking for. They're too open, they're too busy. We're looking for something very private where we can do this. Yeah,
Okay.
so.
Questions?
Will you do regular tattooing as well?
I do, yes. Yeah, but it's a very private clientele. I don't advertise. We're not, I have my clients. I've had them for years, and that's what we do.
Right.
So
Can you tell us where you've been practicing up till now?
the last 4 years, I've been at Retribution Tattoo in Roy. Just left there in July and pursuing this.
And it says your wife works with you.
Yes, she does. She apprenticed under me. I trained in a studio in Idaho Falls, and she apprenticed under me for the last 2 years and has progressed to a tattoo artist as well.
Thank you. A motion is in order.
I would
I
make a
sit, or
motion.
do I?
Oh,
Sorry.
You're fine, you can
Okay.
speak up.
I would make a motion that we approve the consideration for the conditional use permit request for a proposed body art tattoo parlor studio located in a suite at approximately 750 West Riverdale Road within Fifth Avenue Salons as requested by Albert Schiffler.
we have a second.
Second.
Michelle, will you pull the commission?
Commissioner Sparks,
Aye.
Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Herman,
Aye.
Mr. Wingfield,
Aye.
Mr. Nye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Action item 3, consideration to approve Coleman View Heights PRUD preliminary subdivision plan and plat located at approximately 5368 South, 1050 West, Riverdale, Utah, 84405, as requested by RD Development Group. Mr. Eggett.
Thank you. Yeah, the petitioners tonight are RD Development Group. They're represented, and my iPad decided to close on me. Sorry about that. They're represented tonight by Dave Morton and Keaton Morton, as well as Rich Cops is here representing the ownership group on this property. It is located in a single-family residential R2 zone, which is technically single-family residential, and single-family rental unit residential is the current title, although at some point in the future we'll strip that in rental unit since we have a new way to do that. The proposed subdivision plat is a preliminary approval review, wherein the Planning Commission does act as the approving agency for this request tonight. They are also requesting a planned residential use development component to the subdivision, which I can discuss further with the next item, so I'll kind of skip that for the moment. The ownership of the lot where this request is on a couple of different parcels and owned by Moview LLC and Brent H. and Kimberly A. Coleman Family Trust. The property, obviously, we all know has existed as a drive-in theater property. It's no longer functioning now, and then otherwise undeveloped areas that have either been agricultural or otherwise unused land. The general plan guidance for this area is set as a residential overlay zone, and recreational open space is adjacent to it. However, in the event that the residential overlay zone isn't utilized to create a synergy with the golf course as the general plan has wanted. It does say that it will also, as an alternative approach for future land use, consider residential low density housing, and this proposed plan does match that request. We went through this whole discussion at the general plan rezone layer, or excuse me, not general plan, the rezone back in the end of the year last year, but I just wanted to reiterate that. As far as review comments from staff, I'll just go over mine. I know this is the part where it gets kind of long, so just bear with me. I'll do the best I can to kind of try to not to be redundant. On the cover sheet, we just want to make sure that the address of the project site is corrected to 5368 South 1050 West. The reason for that is addresses on the east side of the road or even addresses on the west side of the road are odd. For some reason, this property snuck through years ago as 5369. I can't figure out how that happened, but it did. So it's not typical addressing convention. It's bothering me for some reason. I don't know how it happened, but it did. It's confusion. So anyway, also property owner's name needs to be added to the cover page of the plan drawings, and some kind of contact number, even if it's Mr. Kopp's number, some kind of contact number to link to the property owner on the drawings. Approving agency, you need to make sure Riverdale City is shown there and any other applicable utility companies if they are affected by items within the drawings. Licensed land surveyor at a future date. I expect a seal and signature shown. I just note it's not shown at this time for Mr. Williams. Street names, all these names need a secondary numerical address system as well in parentheses. So again, I can work through that with whomever I need to and try to identify what those should be. And then addresses will need to be identified with each lot. So we'll go through that. On the plat sheet, we want to make sure, and I've talked to the Public Works Director about this, so he may have noticed as well, that lots 5 and 6, 21 and 22, 32 and 33, all have a note addressed to them on the notes to the side that just say we'll have no vehicular access to 1050 West, and the same for lots 1 through 5 with no access to South Weber Drive. See here, under consulting engineer stamp, we'll expect that the engineer stamp signature and license expiration will be eventually provided. On the plat itself, if any approving utility agents feel like they need to sign, make sure those are added. Skipping down, under landscaping, on page 3 of my review, I have stamped concrete should be considered in park strips along 1050 West and South Weber Drive. And then we also don't have any current private irrigation plans, if any, for the open space areas that are part of that amenity ban for the project. Let's see. Skipping down, page 5. I'm not sure what the height range of the proposed homes would be. I'm sure we could figure that out, or the size relative square footage wise. I mean, I'm sure they could even come up and address that, but it'd just be nice in the future reports to have that. On setbacks, we just would like to see some typical lot setbacks. We don't, obviously, I know each and every one's a little bit different when the home goes in, but it's good to know what those setback numbers are, especially to warrant the PRUD requested elements of that, to know what we're looking for. If there's a few variations, what might those 3 or 4 variations be, or if there's just one, and that's the maximum footprint, even that would be helpful to know. So if we could get that, that'd be good. Let's see. Anything else? Under sidewalk, I couldn't find a cross section shown and unsure as to the sidewalk standard depth and approach depth meeting the city standards. So that's a small thing, but I did note that. There's some fire hydrant comments that I'll cover real quick in a minute. Didn't see any new gas line size and type, location of the project, or notes referencing, will be identified by such and such, or where they connect in, those sorts of notes. So we typically see notes, we look for notes like that. I tried looking everywhere for it, couldn't find it. So if it's there, I just didn't see where it was. Same for electrical, same for telephone, same for cable TV. On the cross-section of curb and gutter, I have no cross-section shown on the civil details or otherwise in the plans. I do recognize where they're at, but typically we'll see a cross-section. It just wasn't provided. Same with no details for the gutter inlet box, and I have no reference to bicycle safe grates anywhere as it relates to the gutter inlet box. Couldn't see if there are any cleanout boxes or thrust blocking information, and then we need to make sure we get a water solution figured out. I've changed it from saying show proof of transfer water rights to show proof of a water solution on site. So I know we're working with the developers on trying to find alternative water solutions that don't necessarily require water rights. I think I've communicated that to the Planning Commission. If I have not, that is something that we hope will be forthcoming in the next month to resolve, to give a secondary option to developers that may be an alternative to water rights capture. So that could be a good news piece, hopefully in the near future. Switching gears to the Public Works Director, he has quite a few comments. These have been shared with the developers as well, items 1 through 12. A lot of things we've seen before on typical projects. I'm just trying to see if there's anything that really stands out here. One interesting one that I know Mr. Douglas is concerned about is Canal Company approval design and plans for bench canal work. And he does have a comment: pipe, Riverdale Bench Canal, full length per Riverdale City and Riverdale Bench Board of Directors. So I believe that the development group is trying to figure that one issue out, but Mr. Douglas is concerned about that one. That's one of his significant ones. He also has one on here that is kind of unique that I don't normally see, which says location of orifice plate is a concern. The current location of the orifice plate will require pipe cleaning to remove sediment. The orifice plate should be installed so sediment is retained in the detention pond. The others are ones that we have typically seen. Under streets, he's got 3 items. Street lights are only required at intersections and change of directions. Street names and signs locations need to be shown on plans. When he writes comments like that, need to be, like even going back to stormwater, it says retention, detention structure, design and materials shown. He's wanting to find out where those are and if they're shown, what they say. Under signs, street signs including stop, yield, and speed limit shown as required. Underwater, there's items 1 through 9. Meter box design per city standards. Show the existing water utilities on the plan and existing water services or lines that are not in use that need to be capped so that they are capped at the main line correctly by the standards of the city. T's requiring 3 valves shown in the city Riverdale city specifications. Fire hydrants require a valve on the T in the street, so he wants those shown. Backflow preventers shown. Proposed irrigation system shown, like I noted. Show driveways to ensure water meters are not located in driveways. Provide water. Okay, we covered that. Sewer. There's 4 items here. Typical ones. One that I do want to highlight: abandoned sewer lines will need to be capped at the property line. And he says we're concerned with the amount of pipe being laid at 0.5. I think that's 0.5 inches or angle. It's a slope. A slope grade, right? Yeah, that's what he's saying. We have strict standard for pipe bellies and deviations. I think the contractor is going to have a hard time meeting the standards with the current grade of pipe. And I think he's saying the city standards there. And then other notes that he wants to see on the plans. Item 3, lot 33 probably has the bench canal running through the center of it. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's a comment he made. The fence is there. He just hasn't seen it, but he does reiterate park strip will need to be colored in stamped concrete. Notes need to indicate the infrastructure is installed according to Riverdale City standards, and then a response letter. Looking at the police chief, no concerns there. The fire chief deferred to our fire marshal. Fire marshal just says install hydrants at the entrance of the cul-de-sac, and then he has a note here right out of the fire code 501.4 about timing of installation for those improvements and how that should work. So if there's any other questions, I would have the developers talk to Mr. Koger about those items. Going through the engineer report, we're almost done. Going to the engineer report, there's a lot of engineering comments there, specifically just general comments. He has concerns. One he did bring up to me that I want to point out. Number 9, traffic impact study was completed but without knowledge of the roundabout. Please have traffic engineer ensure that traffic study is adjusted accordingly. He is very concerned about that. We are equally crossways with UDOT on the roundabout and trying to get that done in the right way, and we want to make sure that this project is aware of that and takes that into account as far as use and access. So he notes a comment about the geotechnical report having some conflicting data, so that probably needs to be looked at a little bit more, making sure UDOT is good with everything and meeting UDOT requirements for 1050 West and how it interfaces with South Weaver Drive, a couple of other items there. So under the plat itself, just a few brief plat comments. The site plan then, on each of the sheets he goes through, I'm going to save everybody time. I'm sure that they can read the engineering comments and figure it out, but you'll see there's some node deficiencies for sheet C100, sheet C200, sheet C300, sheet C400, and sheet C500, and sheet C600. That is a tongue twister, but there you go. And then sheets PPO to PP9 plan profile, he said update with information contained on other pages as they're updated. Several sheets have both sanitary sewer and storm water at same grade entering and exiting manholes where they appear to be other pipes with slope sufficient to put a .2 drop. So that's everything I have. And with that quick but brief review, I'll defer to the planning commissioners if you have any other questions or comments from me or the developers at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Eggett? Questions, comments, concerns?
There's a lot of stuff that needs to be done.
Oh, and I did forget to note too, you can see the applications there. There is their calculations for storm drain detention system. That's in there. Their plans for maintenance and the plan itself is in there. And then you'll see on page, what is it? Page about 58 is where you'll start to see what some of the designs of the homes would be, like the architectural renderings. Thereafter, quite a few pages of it, the variations, and you'll see the UDOT variance request form that I discussed upstairs for access onto 1050 West. And then you'll see that landscaping detail that I was talking about as on page 69 as a component. It does show quite a large detention basin there in the middle connected to the dog park. So that explains kind of what I couldn't remember seeing it earlier if it had it or not. And then there is another open space area up by lot 58, which is kind of just a kind of orphan area, but has some potential to be a good open grass area. So there you go. Sorry for that intrusion, but there you go.
Mr. Eggett?
No discussion?
If you guys have any questions for the applicant or Mr. Eggett?
You want Mr. Morton or, well, either Mr. Morton.
I'd be happy to come up and
Come on up.
say a few words. I'm usually never, my wife says I'm never at a loss for words, so I don't know if that's good or bad. Thank you
State your
so
name and city for the record, please.
Dave Morton, Sandy, Utah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry?
If Rob is okay with it after Mr. Morton speaks, yeah.
I want to thank Mr. Eggett and the rest of the staff have been great to work with. We've kind of, we probably would have had this before you a little sooner, but we've been kind of trying to deal with some of the water issues. And fortunately, I think we've identified a couple good solutions, so we feel really good about that. We also know that one of the things that's been important to us is this is a very important part of Riverdale. And so the open space, we have over an acre and a half total of open space, and a lot of that open space we've decided not to use it based on the fact that there's power lines under there, and we've decided to create kind of a nice area. In addition, I don't know if in the landscape plan itself there'll be two pickleball courts, which is a major coup and a big draw for a development like this, and so we're excited about that. We've also I'm glad Mike brought up early on. We had the traffic report done very early on in the process, and we could not get actually the roundabout information at the time from the city or from UDOT at the time. So that can be updated very easily. And most of the items, it looks like a long laundry list. It always starts like this, and I know that Ensign Engineering is also already whittling that down. So we're excited about this. This is an absolutely beautiful piece of ground. There was a comment made specific to sewer. Who would have thought that a piece of ground is too flat? So it's interesting. So we'll have to raise the site slightly in certain areas to kind of get the sewer to drain properly, and we'll do that to city standards as we've agreed to. So we're excited about it. The Colemans have had all of the input on the name and roads and things like that, which is important to us to create some heritage. There was even some thought of trying to utilize the open space to put one of the screens and possibly show a movie that is not, it didn't work out that way. They're just too large. But we tried it as best we can to kind of create that heritage for the city and for the public. So any questions that you would like to ask me while I'm here, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Only question I have, I know that one of the things that was mentioned is that the subdivision proposal before your proposal that would go into this area might work with the golf course. So along that side, I guess it's the south side of the property. Are those going to be open to the golf course? Will there be fencing along there? What do you?
So-
what have you talked
It's a
with
great-
the
we
Schneiders about?
We have talked to the Schneiders, not specifically about that, and that could be an option. You know, we could right now for a placeholder. There's kind of a picnic area or a dog park on that end, but really it could be anything. And we could probably. I'm not certain if the golf course would want that or not.
Sure, I understand.
But it could be something that I think we would be amenable to add as well. I'm not even sure if it's big enough, but you might be able to have some sort of little putting area or something like that you could incorporate to kind of make it somewhat golf centric. But yeah, it's if it was a little larger, that open space, we've got a nice little medium-sized driving range right in the center. It just doesn't have a lot of, and my slice is so bad, I'd be worried I'd be hitting homes left and right. So I think that probably wouldn't work, but it would be nice if we could do that. So
All right, thank you very much.
thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Then we'll bring up Mr. Gailey, who has a comment about this. Riverdale City citizen. Okay.
My name is David Gailey. I live at the bottom of Ritter Drive, and several times I have come in to complain about speeding cars on Ritter Drive, but this time I've come with maybe a possible solution or slowdown. The speed limit right in front of my driveway, or just to the west of my driveway, is 35 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour, as a matter of fact. The cars coming up the road, especially out of South Weber, the people are doing 40 miles per hour at different times. I've never seen anyone slow down to 25 miles an hour. But what I would like to do is if the city would like to do is putting some speed bumps coming on to Ritter Drive, especially out of South Weber, to slow cars down, so that when they get on Ritter Drive, they're doing the speed limit of 20 miles an hour.
Mr. Gailey, the roundabout will have speed humps as part of the roundabout design.
Okay.
So the crosswalks will be like we have over here. You know, they're elevated to cross over. It'll have a similar component to it.
And I knew that it looked like they were doing this. I live right there in the first house on Ritter Drive.
I mean, it may not be to the level that you're thinking a straight out large speed hump, but there'll be declination entry areas.
I was just thinking of just having the small bumps. You know.
Now I think about it, I guess it's not really speed humps as much. They're called sharrows, but it'll still narrow the lane of traffic and slow down speeds coming in and out of that.
Ritter Drive is just a 2-lane.
And I would say if you have a speed concern, your best avenue of response is either the police chief or even Mr. Brooks, our city administrator.
Yeah, and I have been before to the city commission a couple of times for this and haven't received any.
I just don't know that the planning commissioners will be able to address the concerns that you're noting. I think the best way to get more guidance or response would be to talk to one of those two individuals.
And when are they supposed to start the other?
That roundabout construction, it's delayed because of UDOT, and I don't know enough of the details. Steve Brooks is going to be your best resource at this point, or Sean Douglas.
And the one reason I come tonight is because there's some small children that visit my house quite often, and there are small children who live on Ritter Drive, and some of them are just to that age where they would like to get out in the road and walk around, and so it's become quite a concern to me.
I would definitely, I know our police chief likes to be attentive to these kind of complaints, and he takes them very seriously, so I would really say he would be probably your best first resource, but Mr. Brooks would probably be your second best resource for this conversation.
But I appreciate you listening to me, and
No problem.
hope something can be done.
Talk to Chief Brinkman. He's great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gailey. All right, a motion is in order.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the Coleman View Heights PRU preliminary subdivision plan and plat located at approximately 5368 South, 1050 West, Riverdale, Utah, 84405, as requested by RD Development Group, with the understanding that they will comply with all city and engineering concerns.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Do Is there anything we need to add in there for staff concerns?
Not at this point because it's a preliminary. This product will come back to the Planning Commission for a second final formal recommendation review.
Michelle, will you pull the commissioners?
Commissioner Wingfield,
Aye.
Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
Commissioner Jones,
Aye.
Commissioner Knight,
Aye.
Commissioner Spires,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Thank you, Michelle. And that rolls into action item 4, review and discussion of planned residential unit development PRUD request at 5368 South, 1050 West, Riverdale, Utah 84405 as part of the Coleman View Heights PRUD subdivision, as requested by RD Development Group. Mr. Agate.
Thank you. This is a little bit of a different animal as it relates to a typical subdivision in that with a planned residential unit development application, we do have a requirement to take it through a public hearing process. The reason for that is it's a modification to an existing subdivision that either affects sometimes the lot size, the lot use, or the lot setbacks, or in any combination or all three together. In this case, and I may be speaking a little bit out of turn, so you could certainly ask the developers the development group to comment to this, but my understanding is the biggest reason for this PRUD is to allow some flexibility with the setbacks. The most flexible the setbacks are allowed to be with the PRUD would be 5 feet on the side yard. The R2 zone requires a maximum or a minimum, of an 8-foot side yard, but a total of 18 feet. So you can see how that's very different. If you have 2 side yards of 5, you're at 10 feet for side yard setback versus 18, which the standard requires. So that's my understanding, but again, they may be able to illuminate any other additional reasons for the PRUD. That being said, they have provided the application and paid the fee requirement for the application, as well as a brief narrative of the reason for the PRUD. They also talk about in it the power line impact to the PRUD area and how they understand that part of the PRUD granting would be to provide an amenity. So the open space areas don't provide that. Now, I'm trying not to go too deep into the weeds on this because this is set in a public hearing, but I at least want to set the stage for what we're talking about as far as the PRUD element. So I think with that, if you read over their application and you look through the documentation a little bit more, they are required to provide CCNRs that we retain as a city with any PRUD, and any maintenance of the HOA requirements for maintenance are to be maintained by a professional entity per city code. But again, that's something that they're very aware of. So I have had multiple conversations with their team about the PRUD and how it works. I do have a good sense that they understand what it is. So with that, again, where we're not actually considering the PRUD tonight, I don't want to take it any further than that, but I just want to set the stage for that. And with that, I would defer to the Planning Commission to discuss the public hearing setting, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Agate. Any discussion, or would we like to roll into action item 4B?
4B.
All right. Consideration to set a public hearing for planned residential unit development PRUD request at 5368 South, 1050 West, Riverdale, Utah 84405 as part of the Coleman View Heights PRUD subdivision, as requested by RD Development Group. No further explanation necessary from Mr. Agate. A motion is in order.
I move that we set a public hearing regarding proposed update to the moderate income housing plan element of the Riverdale City General Plan and new requirements to be included in the oops, I'm looking at the wrong one, sorry. Should be for the PRUD Coleman subdivision, yeah.
Yep.
To set a public hearing for planned residential unit development PRUD request at 5368 South, 1050 West, Riverdale, Utah 84405 as part of the Coleman View Heights PRUD subdivision as requested by RD Development Group. And that would be
September 13th.
September 13th.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Michelle, would you pull the commission, please?
Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
Commissioner Jones,
Aye.
Commissioner Knight,
Aye.
Commissioner Spires,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Wingfield.
Aye. Thank you. See you on the 13th. Action item 5, review and discussion of House Bill 462 requirement to update moderate income housing plan element of the Riverdale City General Plan and to discuss new requirements to be included in moderate income housing plan element. Mr. Agate.
This one has two.
Thank you. I have talked about this quite extensively in the work session, but I do want to note a few of the documents in here in your packet. I think they'll make more sense now that I have talked about that. You'll see in there, following kind of the intro on it, you'll see the document that's talking about the reporting standards. And on that reporting standards, you'll see how they establish which jurisdictions are required to report. It's based on the size of a county and or the city if they're larger than 5,000 persons in that community. So that's the standard. You'll see some of the explanation of what things they're looking for as part of that moderate income housing report and the moderate income housing element of a general plan. The second document is the actual discussion regarding the housing element strategies, how they're applied, what they are, and you'll see that there's articles A through X that are called the menu, is what they call it, menu of options. It seems to be that we will qualify for about 8 or 9. You have to have a minimum of at least 3 strategies in a community by state law, and if you add 2 more of them and have a fixed guideway transit station, you get priority. Actually, I think you only have to have 1 more. 4 strategies, you get priority for funding. So as long as we at least have 3 or more, we stay in competitive priority for funding through anything that's monies granted by the state or even limitations on federal government spending, which is kind of interesting. That's how they're kind of using a stick and a carrot at the same time to motivate participation in this project, or this effort. So there'll eventually be what they call, if you look on page 4 of that document, which is on page 134, a clearinghouse of affordable housing data. That is the goal of why we're doing all this analysis as cities for the state and then providing that documentation. To that point, I've brought in with me a couple of copies of the update that I'm working on, just so you can see it. It's more, I did only 3 copies, so hopefully you can share. Maybe 1 for every 2 of you, if that's okay. But what I have highlighted in blue is already the extensive work that I've put into this thing. And like I said in the work session, I'm about 80%, maybe 85% if we're being generous, done with it. But you can see there's quite a bit of changes that are required in order to not only meet the standard, but just even update our numbers. And you might even see some of these numbers are kind of interesting. I do have to go pretty heavily off of U.S. Census data tied to the 2020 year because that's the most recent that's available through the census. But there is some interesting findings even as far as the residential permits and stuff. Where this gets really meaty in meeting the state requirement is all the way back onto page 12. You'll see there's an entire area where I've dedicated a bunch of new language, and that's where you'll see that new implementation strategy / comprehensive housing strategies selection component. And the ones that I'm identifying right now are working or will work towards meeting that goal. Like I said, there's probably realistically 8. I have 9. There's one in there that's kind of, I think, a little weak. But anyway, the reason I brought that in is more just to
You want to see anything?
kind of highlight what you'll see. I guess if you have any thoughts or comments between now and if we do set a public hearing that you want to maybe have me look at. The reason that it's also important that you're aware of it is as a planning commission, city council, you'll need to also be able to quote unquote defend our decision making with this document because this will be a living, breathing component that will be a part of our general plan. Now, good or bad timing, however you look at this, we are going to start and have started a comprehensive general plan update as well. Kathy Eskelson is the face of that, of the Planning Commission on that group. We had our kickoff meeting last week. I'm hoping that my work on this will not be wasted and some semblance of it will be in the next generation of the moderate income housing element, but I don't know. It may get all rewritten as part of that general plan update, which is just unfortunate. Too bad I didn't get on this general plan update a year ago so we could have this housing element updated and just easily try to check some boxes, but whatever, maybe it's better to do it this way. I don't know. But the bottom line, what I'm trying to get in making this commentary is that the housing element will again go through another update as part of the comprehensive general plan update that we're going to be working on over the next year. That's my point in saying that. And there may be feedback from the public at large that may further adjust what's already in this document as part of that general plan update document. So it may look entirely different, and the statistics and information in that final form a year from now may look different than it does with this one if and when we approve it. So we're in a really an interesting spot as it relates to the general plan. There's a lot of change and flexibility that you're going to see as a commission and as a city, and with residential input, the plan itself will go through a lot of changes when it's in its final form, and this will be a part of that. So I don't want to bore you with any more details, but there's a lot here, I guess, is the bottom line, and we need to make sure it's done right and it's defensible and that you're aware of it. As boring as it may be to read, you probably will want to read the final version of it and just be ready to know it in the event that anybody in the public at large asks you about it, because every city's in a housing crisis. We hear it all the time, and it'll be really important and good to know what our standards are as a city and how we, defend our position related to that crisis.
Thank you, Mr. Eggett. All right, are we looking at September 13th on this one as well? Okay.
That would be the next available. That's
Action
right.
item 5B, consideration to set a public hearing regarding proposed update to the moderate income housing plan element of the Riverdale City General Plan and new requirements to be included in a moderate income housing plan element. A motion is in order.
I'll propose that we set a public hearing regarding the proposed update to the moderate income housing plan element of the Riverdale City General Plan. New requirements to be included in moderate income housing plan element, and setting that for the next date of September 13th.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Michelle, will you poll the commission, please?
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Wingfield,
Aye.
Commissioner Jones,
Aye.
Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
Commissioner Nye,
Aye.
Commissioner Spires.
Aye.
Thank you. Do any planning commissioners have any comments?
Bless you.
All I would ask is that final copy be provided back to Michelle or me when you're done with it. You can keep looking at it till the end of the meeting. It's fine.
Your excuse. In this plan, I see now what we have proposed we're going to do. Will that include all these housing developments that we're going into?
So I've already commented on that in there. There's elements where I've already talked about that. Like I already briefly, without going into a lot of detail because it doesn't need to be a part of it, but I've already briefly started talking about the 68 acres south of here. That's in here. There's a comment or two referencing that and commenting the growth of, yes, and there's some of these strategies I will go very much into, like the Riverdale Townhomes project that's going to add 45 townhomes in the form of apartments. I will bring that into some of these strategies showing that there are things already happening in the city that have happened in the last 3 years that are significant and change from previous tradition over decades prior that are showing that we're turning a corner with some of these things that the state's looking for. But what the problem is, where the break is, what we're hearing from the Utah League of Cities and Towns leadership is the break is the legislature isn't connecting the dots to what's going on the ground because they can't go into every city and do a surveillance, right? So there's a disconnect of reality versus what they think or what they perceive to be the issue. So cities and governments have already responded, and you're seeing an overabundance of these kind of products starting to happen and solutions that are at least trying to happen. Maybe they're not perfect, but it seems like the legislature isn't quite seeing it from their perspective. So the hope is to create this clearinghouse to create both visibility in the form of statistics and information to meet the reality. Because right now there's clearly a break. And so that's, yeah. So hopefully if I do this right, I can highlight these projects to show that we're more than, aware of the issue and we're trying to address it.
Do we have a number?
That's the tricky part. They want numbers and statistics, but the only thing I can do with numbers and statistics is building permits and subdivision lots. I mean, honestly, and then try to identify how many, if any, are moderate income rates of rent, right? Like, for instance, we've talked to, again, I got to be real careful because nothing's to the planning commission, but we've talked about ideas on Leslie's mobile home park, and if it were to go forward as an apartment, trying to identify a certain percentage of units that are in moderate income housing rent rates, and making sure that they can provide those so that then we can statistically report. We had conversations with the developer, they agreed to this, and 20% of the units are at rents equaling 75% of the traditional average rates for rent, right? Those kind of things help to explain the narrative that we are actively trying to create affordable housing in Riverdale.
Now those numbers, though, that 75%, that's regional basis and not a state or a national.
We actually have numbers per the Census Bureau for Riverdale as well as Weber County, so we would kind of look at both of those numbers to create that. Yeah.
All right, well, I'd like to make a motion, we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
It's taking a lot of work, Mike. Well done.
I know, it's real exciting stuff to talk about, huh?